I'm Shelby, and this is a very bratty edition of Filmish Chats. Hey, how y'all doing? Oh, it's been a while, hasn't it? Oh, sorry about that. But welcome to season 6 of Filmish Chats. I'm Shelby Cooke, head curator and editor-in-chief at Filmeast, joined today by my fellow team members, Will Schofield and Ishnor. To kick off this new season of the pod, we're bringing you 2 episodes dedicated to our newest zine, Brat, but it's literally not because it's just a bratty movie collection, which is what we've been doing while we've been away for so long. So please give us some slack. Curated by myself and Filmish Chat's very iconic William Schofield, Brat, but it's literally not because it's just a bratty movie collection, is a zine that features 18 films and TV shows paired with each song from Charli XCX's revolutionary album Brat. These works, unique in genres, styles, and narratives, all embrace the ethos of Brat, creating a cinematic way to relive the pop culture phenomenon. The 60-page program includes expert analysis from your very own curators, explaining each selection and how the work falls into the Bratosphere. In the first 2 episodes of season 6, we're going to bring you discussions on 2 films we curated for the collection, Sebastián Lelio's A Fantastic Woman and Brian De Palma's Carrie. Our Brat movie zine is available for purchase from our website, film-east.com, and costs £1.99 or $2.50 for digital download. And guess what? For a very limited time, exclusive, you can purchase a stunning, and I mean stunning, print copy of this collection. So you can get all 60 Brat green pages printed on a satin finish paper for only £6.50 or $9 while supplies last. In this episode, we will be discussing Sebastián Lelio's A Fantastic Woman, a film curated by myself and paired with track 9 from Brat, So I. Marina's world is turned upside down after the sudden death of her older boyfriend, Orlando. Orlando's transphobic son and ex-wife accuse her of causing Orlando's death and bars her from attending his funeral. While fighting for her right to say goodbye to her partner, Marina also searches for solace and understanding in her grief. Brat's only true ballad, So I, is Charli's musical farewell to her good friend and collaborator Sophie. Unlike the other tracks, both versions of So I come together to tell the singular story of Charli's grieving process, using the first iteration to reflect on the pain and guilt of losing someone so unexpectedly, and the second to focus on the joy of remembering and celebrating moments shared together. From the synopsis of Lelio's film, it's easy to see narratively how these 2 works match. The film is a rumination on sorrow, loss, regret, and love. But a far more interesting correlation exists between the film, the song, and Sophie's legacy. Sophie and Marina share an etherealness that establishes them as someone beyond their physical form. Coupled with Lelio's magical realism techniques, Marina's soft and level demeanor, even in the face of adversity, as well as angelic operatic voice, allow you to see her as almost divine. The same can be said of Sophie's astrological facade, particularly in the depiction of herself on her only solo album, Oil of Every Pearl's on Insides. The mystical identity these 2 embody is captured in an otherworldly electronic riff in So I, which is placed in the background of the original song to add depth to the sound, but brought to the forefront in the remix, manifesting an image of Sophie, and by association, Marina, as transcendental.
singing these songs you left behind. It's okay to cry. So I know I can cry, so I cry.
Without further ado, please enjoy our group discussion of A Fantastic Woman. I watched this film for the first time in my master's course, film studies course. So this is where I found this film. Had any of you two seen it before?
No, no, I hadn't heard of
No,
it before, frankly.
So
yeah.
what were your thoughts on the film? What did you think about it?
I I really enjoyed it. I thought I don't know, I watched it last night. Not to reveal too much about the inner workings of Film East, but I think that might have been a mistake because I'm still somewhat digesting it.
Mm.
So the notes that you're gonna hear today are probably kind of half thought out, to be honest. Um, but no, I really enjoyed the experience of watching it. I found it very engaging. It wasn't an easy watch, you know.
Mm.
It was a lot of very uncomfortable, unpleasant scenes. Um, I appreciated that it ended with a slightly optimistic lilt, which it very much didn't need to. Um, and it didn't really seem like it was going down that path for a lot of it. But actually watching it, yeah, I think the more I think about it, the more I'm cooled on it slightly. Um, just because I don't know. I feel like there's nothing. This sounds harsh to say, but there wasn't a whole lot that to me was particularly standout in
Mm.
its story or its presentation or its depictions of these things. But at the same time, perhaps in a week, I'll come to the conclusion that it doesn't need to be. It's just telling a fairly realistic story about a
Yeah,
woman in a shitty situation.
Hmm.
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I I watched it this morning, so I absolutely um I had a lot of time to think about it as well. So while I was watching it, I was thoroughly engaged. I uh had a few issues while watching it, but then towards the end of it, I just realized that, like, as Will has said, that there was nothing that stood out particularly, and the thoughts might change. For me, it was quite the opposite because I was thinking that how you don't have to always be loud in your resilience. It can be soft and it can be quiet, and you can still um, be your authentic self. And I
Mhm.
loved that tonality that this film has. I loved that. I loved the softness. I loved the vulnerability. I loved how authentic the representation as well was. I also like that it didn't talk about, it talked about what happens after. It doesn't talk about what happens before or during the transition, what happens after, and how difficult the systemic prejudices are, and how difficult it is to live with sort of dignity or to have the basic human rights. So I think those things really stood out, and the way they were dealt with. So I think it could be one of my, I think I really liked it. I think I will recommend it to people. So yeah.
That's really interesting that you brought up the point of the softness. Um, I obviously hadn't seen this film in a really long time when I rewatched it, and I'd forgotten about how really brutal some of the violence is in it, and some of the um, hate that she encounters. And I think you're right, where it's you kind of, I think we're so accustomed to seeing, particularly with with queer cinema, it's positioned as if she's going to be very strong and she's going to be, stand up,
Yeah.
particularly with the microaggressions, with the police officer calling her sir, or, the detective insinuating that she's a sex worker. Um, you know, you would you would hope, I feel like, that she would be able to stand up for herself, and she's very quiet. She doesn't say anything. She just lets these microaggressions just wash over her. Um, Obviously, she does gain her strength in the end. She does stand up for herself. But it is like, it does kind of raise those questions of like, you do feel like you're like, why isn't she doing anything? Why isn't she, saying, hey, stop doing this. Give me back my dog, Um, yeah, so I agree with you. I think there is, but then also like you think about it and, in real life, that is something that you just have to do to protect yourself. You don't want to get in a even
Yeah.
more violent situation by
Mm.
being aggressive back to your aggressor. Um, so yeah, I think it's a very grounded depiction. I think there are something that I do want to talk about is the magical realism elements. So it has this very realist um, approach to telling the story. It feels very authentic, very real, but it still has these magical moments in it. So I guess since we're on that topic, how did you guys interpret this sort of magical realism elements that happen throughout the film? So there's these moments where she's being swept by the wind, and she can't walk
Yeah.
through the wind. There's the club sequence when she's flying through the club. Do you guys have any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Mm. Well, I thought at the beginning of the movie it opens on the spa in the kind of waterfall spa, and I mean that's the title literally comes through the spa, and one of the first things that happens is that Orlando, her partner, says, I bought us tickets to go to this place. And immediately I watching it for the first time, I thought, that's the MacGuffin. That's going to
Hmm.
come back later. It's the opening shot of the film and him talking about this. And then it introduces a missing envelope, and eventually she gets this key, and um and throughout the journey there is these kind of magical realism elements of these little weird moments where she sees him on the street, and when she goes to the club and it's all slow motion sparkling dancing, it kind of almost creates this atmosphere of kind of I don't know how to describe it, but it make fairy tale is too strong, but it makes it feel like
Yeah.
a story. And then so when the ultimate conclusion does happen, where she finds the locker, she's not where she doesn't get to see the funeral, she finds the locker and it's empty. She never gets to go to the waterfall. All of this stuff that in a normal kind of happy in a narrative, in a story, you'd think it would be building to this conclusion,
Hmm.
and then it doesn't, because that's not how life works.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Hmm.
stuff just ends, stuff just happens. It's just nothing, and that's kind of how it was for her. And I feel like the kind of glaze of magical realism over the film kind of exemplifies that. It plays into this idea that it is a story, that it is fictional,
Hmm.
that anything can happen, but it doesn't, because
Hmm.
that is kind of how life
Yeah.
is a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree. I agree. But I also feel like the magical realism part was also helpful in understanding, like how Shelby said that we were like, oh, why aren't you doing anything?
Hmm.
So when the magical realism with the winds sweeping and swaying, she sort of tries to stop, and she stops herself from being swayed. So it's just basically it mirrors her emotional turmoil. It mirrored the emotional turmoil that she is facing for me. And when the dance sequence came and she dances, and it sort of like uh, reflected the yearning for being free or liberated or being who she is and to be able to live the way she wants to live. So those things, the magical realism part helped basically the story move, but also like gave an insight into her inner workings of her mind and her heart and her feelings. So yeah, but
Yeah, no, I completely agree because Daniela Vega's performance is very controlled. She doesn't give much away in her performance. And it's kind of hard to read her. I feel like you're projecting a lot of your own feelings onto her, but these magical realism elements give you an insight into what is going on inside of her head, and they're allowing you to see what it is that she's feeling, how she's interpreting the situation that she's stuck in. Um, so it really, I don't, I think it could give, these sort of magical realism elements could be seen as just an aesthetic tool, just as a way of making the film interesting. But I think it does ultimately serve a purpose in the theme and of telling
yeah,
this story of this character.
yeah. I also like the mirror imagery wherein
Mm.
she stands in front of the mirror and it's just like it seemed like the fractured identity that she is facing and the societal pressure. So that for me was really powerful as well, the mirror imagery there.
hmm
Yeah.
So this film, the reason why we're talking about it is because it's featured in our Brat curated collection. I am the one that selected it, and it's paired with both the original and the remix version of the song So I. So, firstly, would you two consider, after seeing it, would you two consider this film Brat?
I would certainly consider her, Brat, the main protagonist. I'm not sure of the film as a whole, but I think, well, I guess it's from about her, so it'd be hard to have one, not the other. But I think her kind of defiance and self-assuredness. There were a lot of points where I was kind of watching and thinking, man, I would not be doing what she's doing right now. I would be kowtowing. I'd be like, oh yes, you want to do you want me to interrogate me on the situation? Absolutely, yeah, just to make sure I'm not a murderer. And I think at the time watching it, I was a little bit baffled, like, why doesn't she just go in for the interview? But obviously, that becomes more apparent as the film continues because she's aware that it's not done out of a kindness. It's not
Mm.
done out of a and as the film goes on, it kind of becomes clearer that even the friendly characters are not her ally, particularly. The detective comes in
Yeah.
claiming that she's there to help and that she knows a lot of trans people and has helped them before, but is actually not at all interested in the lived experience. And then after being stood up for interrogation, basically kind of does a humiliation ritual, forces her to get
hmm
naked. The boss at her job takes her to one side and checks, like, are you okay? I tried to de-escalate that situation. And then immediately after asks in a very threatening manner, so what was that about? Kind of making it very
Mm,
clear that she's more interested in how it's affecting the job rather than her as a person. And the my probably one of my most hated characters in the film is Orlando's brother, who anytime anything negative happens, goes up to her and is like, "Oh, that's really bad. That shouldn't have happened. I'm sorry about that
yeah.
happening." But he never does
Yeah.
anything in the moment. He never
hmm
does anything to help. He's just there to kind of be like, "I'm not like them. I'm a cool one. I'm chill." Um, and I think all of that really paints a picture of um of Marina's wider life and how often she must experience the exact same
Yeah.
thing, and to kind of be able to face it with a straight face and even at the
Yeah.
end with something of a smile. uh that's pretty Brat, if you ask
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
her defiance in a very,
Yes.
when I think when we think of Brat, it's very, on the surface, you think of those Charlie XCX, she's loud, she's mouthy, she's going to tell you how it is. But I think what a lot of people underestimate about Brat and why people connected so much with the album is because there is this undertone of vulnerability and this embracing of the messiness of life,
Yeah.
which is what, a lot of people, of course we all connected with the, fuck you, I'm number one, I'm the best person, that cockiness. But I think what people weren't expecting from it is that real vulnerability. And you definitely see that in uh Marina and her,
Yeah.
like you said, Will, it's this sort of she understands the situation, and perhaps that's why it's so frustrating for us as the viewer because we want her to stand up for herself. We want her to, do what she needs to do. But she doesn't do that because she knows that this is going to continue to happen over and over and over again. And that defiance of being true to herself and being true to who she needs to be, I find that, speaks a lot to what Charlie sings about in some of these songs in the album.
Yeah. I also feel like there is like this sense of like doesn't shrink herself.
Mm.
There is an unapologetic identity like that she lives with. Like she doesn't shrink herself in the manner of her clothing, in the manner of like asking for her dog or wanting to say bye. She gets the dog, she says bye, and then the towards the end there's one scene wherein she punches, and I felt like wow, that for me is like okay, she's still angry, and that I loved, that there is some anger, there is some feistiness to it. But the fact, like for me, I definitely classify it as Brad because she got the dog back, she got to say bye, and she sang on the stage. So for these three things, because there was quiet rebellion, there is like emotional defiance, and there is this unapologetic identity that she lives with. So definitely Brad for
And
me.
it's
Yes.
complex. It shows the complexity of like the human experience. It's not like straightforward. Um,
Yeah.
so obviously pairing it with these two songs. So these two songs, for anyone who doesn't know, is about Charlie's really great collaborator, Sophie, died, I think in 2021. She fell from a roof and she died. No one expected it. And so these two songs are sort of Charlie's musical farewell to this really great collaborator that she had throughout her entire career. And Sophie really shaped the path of, moving Charlie from being a pop star into this sort of house music, alternative sound. Um, so obviously there's the connection there of these songs being about loss and grief. And that's ultimately what the film is about, is um, the loss of someone that you love, and the process that you have to go through in order to grieve that person. But I also think there's some really interesting parallels between Sophie and Marina's, obviously their trans identity, and that's really something I knew when going into this, picking this film for the song. I wanted to pick something that embraced Sophie's transness, because that was something that really she, was part of her identity and was a part of who she was as a artist and as a creator. And obviously, so you see those connections where, I think, although I think in terms of like when we're talking about transness, she wasn't very much a public figure until later in her career. And so people didn't know much about her. She has that sort of quietness that Marina has, and sort of, doesn't need to be aggressive about their identity. I don't think Marina's very aggressive about her transness, and Sophie wasn't very aggressive about her transness. So there's a connection there that I found. But I thought it was also interesting when looking at the musical score of the songs and these sort of magical realism elements that came up in the film. If you listen, and I think hope maybe in post I'll add this in, to really articulate what it is I'm talking about. In the remix version of So I, it sort of opens with these like really weird, like kind of alien sound. And when the first time I listened to it, I was like, I don't like this music that's happening right now. But if you actually go back and listen to the original version of So I, this sort of alien type music is in the underbelly of the original songs. But I think that that sort of like I don't even know what it's like electronic sort of like string type music. Um, I think that sound in and of itself embraces Sophie because Sophie had this very astrological sort of divine identity. You know, she was sort of this otherworldly figure. And then, of course, we see that with Marina's sort of these weird magical realism things that are happening around her and her own operatic performance as a character. And these, you know, the own musical element within the character itself. So do you guys have any thoughts of the correlation between these two songs? That was my rationale when I was making this pairing.
I think it's what struck me is the key similarity that I saw between them was, like you said, the themes of grief and loss and sadness, but additionally both are very much celebrations of their subject. You know, they're inexorably linked to the tragedy and sadness that surrounds them, both real world and in the narrative, but they are ultimately artistic works made to say, look at this person, look at this fantastic woman, and kind of shining a light on every aspect of them and celebrating them. I mean, one of the lyrics in So I is you're a hero and a human. And I feel like that could probably be said of Marina as well, in her own little way of how she deals with the daily struggles.
So I think the last point that I have here, this past year with the Oscars, we saw another foreign trans story go very mainstream, get mainstream attention. Amelia Perez. I think there's some correlation here between, I mean, obviously the stories aren't exactly the same, but there's some correlations. Both of these films went to the Oscars. Both of them got attention from the Academy for whatever it's worth. There was obviously a lot of controversy around Amelia Perez, not only, you know, just completely disregarding the crazy tweets, but a lot of, you know, the representation of Mexican people and culture. Real Mexican people found that to be quite offensive. There was obviously the very strange presentation of gender affirmation surgery in the film. And then of course, we had the fallout of the film Star. I wonder what your thoughts are about how these two films function within the canon of trans and queer cinema. How did Amelia Perez go so wrong, but A Fantastic Woman goes so right? Because they parallel each other a lot, particularly with the magical realism and the very aesthetic nature of the films.
I'll start by admitting I haven't seen Amelia Perez.
It's not worth seeing.
Yeah.
I suffered through it.
Same.
I literally, within the first 20 minutes of the movie, I was sitting there watching it and I said out loud, I was like, this movie is not good. I was like, what is going on in this movie?
I have tried to watch it 5 times. I'm still left with last 30 minutes.
I went to watch it because I wanted to watch it before the Oscars just so that I could kind of know, you know, the peaks and valleys. But every time I sat down to do it, I'd be like, God, it feels like it's so long, and I just don't feel like I'm going to enjoy it. And I Fortnite's right there on my computer. I want to do that instead. But yeah, my understanding of the film comes largely from the online discussion and reviews and the opinions of people that I know who have seen it. So, you know, I've developed a pretty negative assumption based on all of that. But I was thinking about this question yesterday and I formulated what I thought was a really good answer that I'm going to try and remember right now. Which I guess to sum it up, it's that Amelia Perez to my understanding, it's about its transgender character. It's about gender reassignment surgery, and it's about the conversation around it. But rather than kind of engaging with those topic, it uses them to tell the story it wants to tell. They're treated as more of a prop.
Mm.
Emilia Perez, I believe, is a crime boss who
Mhm.
switches gender to try and either hide their identity or get out of their crime. I don't know the exact details. Um, and the the various conflicts that come from that. Whereas a Fantastic Woman is similarly, it is very much about trans identity and its trans character, and the film wouldn't work or wouldn't exist in this without the main character being a trans woman.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have the same connotation stuff, but the film was built around it being a portrayal of a trans woman. That's what it set out to be. It set out to be a film about I guess trans identity, whereas Emilia Perez uses trans identity as a facet or a prop to tell the story that it wants to tell, rather than kind of engage with it in the same way. Would you say that's
Hmm.
accurate at all, or am I
No,
talking out my
I
butt?
think you
Yeah.
absolutely nailed it on the head by saying that it's used as a prop. And I
Yeah.
think it's one of those situations where it's like I've been thinking about this a lot about like wokeness. Like,
Mm.
did they make this movie for the purpose of, oh, we're so woke, we're gonna make a trans movie without really thinking, um, sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dog pitter-pattering outside the
Oh
door.
no, but I wish.
She's like, what is going on in there? Um, but it's this wokeness of, oh, we're gonna make a trans movie. Did they make this movie trans because they knew it would go to the Oscars and it would get all this attention? It's like one of those things where I'm very cynical of the world at the moment. Nothing is, in the way that the world is functioning at the moment, nothing is positive, nothing is authentic. Um, so yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it's more of a prop, it's more of a tool. I mean, the story
Yeah.
is so bizarre, and I get that it came from an opera, but it's just so weird. Like it's just the way that they present transness, it's like, it's very clinical. I mean, that
It,
whole scene where she's going to all these different places. I mean, that's the of course the scene that went viral of them singing about penis to vagina, it's just like it's just like it's so bizarre. It's just so weird and it doesn't have any like truth to it. Whereas a Fantastic Woman, yes, she's trans and that is her, that feeds into her identity. But the entire story isn't it is about her transness, but it's more about her as, her as a full person, um, and her as a human, and that sort of human experience she has as a trans woman.
yeah. It like also like Emilia Perez like turns it into a spectacle and
Yeah.
like trivializes the important issues, whereas like a Fantastic Woman grounds it, and it just is shown that the film actually talks about the authentic experience, and there's a lot of truth to that. And
Mhm.
while I was watching Emilia Perez, I tried watching it. I was like, okay, it's an important film. It's going out in the circuits. I mean, I should be watching it. I started watching it, and after 5 minutes, I was like, I can't watch it. And then I have tried 5 times to watch it. I still can't. I like
Mhm.
it's I mean, when I talk about like, oh, is it made well? Or but it's just like you can play the piano, but there's no music to it.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Mm.
And it's
Yeah.
it's very stereotypical. It plays on the
Yeah.
stereotypes where I think like this is what we were talking about before, where a Fantastic Woman does play on those stereotypes. It plays on the stereotypes of prejudice and hatred towards queer people, people who are different. But in Marina's character, of her not, that quiet rebellion that she has, of her not giving into those stereotypes, is what makes it such a real, authentic film. Where
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but it plays into those stereotypes of, oh, calling her by her dead name, of assuming that she's a sex worker because no reasonable straight white man would date a trans woman, and those type of
Hmm.
prejudiced thoughts that we all have about transness. Um, but it's in the portrayal of Marina and the way that she handles these situations that is, I think, quite exciting and interesting about the story and about the identity that they're exploring.
Also,
May I
like,
ask?
sorry, go.
No, you do your point first. Mine's a bit tertiary.
Just a small point. Like, a Fantastic Women's magical realism does not overshadow the realism of the story.
Yeah. Whereas
Yeah,
Amelia Perez, the whole thing is to be aesthetic.
yes.
It's like the crazy aesthetic doesn't serve any purpose in the story. Like it's like why is this here? Like
Oh, yes.
Do you think, because Amelia Perez, I think it tied for the second most Oscar nominations of any film ever, I think, and it ended up walking away with two, which, not terrible, but nothing compared to, I think, it was more than 10, certainly, nominations.
yeah.
Do you think the controversy that surrounded it and the various tweets of its star, who seemed to hate every minority you can imagine. There were minorities I didn't even know existed that she was tweeting about despising. Do you think that fallout did impact its Oscar wins? I know this is very, very little to do with A Fantastic Woman. I'm just curious.
No, I was literally just talking to my dad about this yesterday. Every the hate campaigns that were going against all of these films, and it was like I'm pretty sure there was an article somewhere about, someone said that the way that these films went after each other was like akin to Harvey Weinstein, a Harvey Weinstein Oscar campaign of like finding any bit of dirt that they could to make people hate these films and not vote for this. I mean, you saw it with The Brutalist with the AI. You saw it with Honora with this intimacy coordinator. You saw it with a or Amelia Perez. I mean, all of these films were like going after each other and like the smear campaigns that were brought about. Like it was like every week was like a new controversy about these movies, like to make us all hate these movies. It was just so weird. Um, but to answer your point, I can't imagine because I feel like those tweets, the revelation of those tweets came out after by the time like voting would have been done with because it was so close to the show. I mean, I don't know when ballots are done being counted or when the votes are done, but I felt like it was so close to the show that it couldn't have really impacted much of the voting. I mean,
Mm.
I don't know. All right. Does anyone have any last minute thoughts, opinions on A Fantastic Woman?
If no, anyone has not seen it, I would recommend please go watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
definitely.
so if you haven't seen it, then sorry for spoiling it also. But
Yeah, you're in bad shape. Yeah, sorry. No,
still worth a watch though.
this is definitely one of those films that has stayed with me, and I think about it a lot. Um, and it was nice to revisit it because I mean, the things that always stick in my head is that club scene, um, of her flying up and that one image. But also, of course, this movie is Brat because there's a club scene in it. If there's a club scene in it, it's Brat. So there you go.
Thanks for listening to our discussion on Sebastián Lelio's A Fantastic Woman. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you're interested in exploring the 17 other pairings that we have in our Brat collection, you can purchase your own copy at film-east.com. Again, the collection is available for digital download for £1.99 or $2.50. And for a limited time, you can purchase a print copy for £6.50 or $9. In our next episode, we will be discussing Carrie and how Carrie fits into the Bratosphere, so keep an eye out for that. To learn more about Film East and any of our upcoming events, our film criticism publications, and our unique activities, you can visit our website at film-east.com or follow us on any of our social media at films_east. And make sure you're subscribed to Filmies Chats anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube, so you never miss one of our deep dives into films and TV. Again, we're Film East, a global film organization. See you next time.